Good evening and welcome to the Tuesday evening sitting and Dharma talk. My name is Seizan, and there may be a few people out there that know me as Bill Ewing. I am a senior student here at the Village Zendo. I've been practicing for 19 years, almost 2 decades, and I love this place. I love the practice here and I love the people here. I particularly appreciated several of the talks recently have been about Chao or Chou. My last talk was about Chou. And one talk that was not about Chou came from one of my Dharma brothers, Rodney Musho Greenblatt. And he talked about the Buddhas on the shelf that are in his studio. He has a beautiful collection of Buddhas. And I'm going to borrow a few minutes of his talk, and I'm going to talk about the Buddha and the objects that I have on my current altar before it changes. The Buddha that's sitting on this little 3-legged stool, I have been refinishing. I put this gold leaf on it, and actually I painted it red first because that's a traditional undercoat. And I let it cure. So I sat with this Buddha being bright red for a while, which was quite interesting. And then over the winter session, I began putting the gold leaf on it. I also put some silver leaf on the lotus that's at the bottom. And I'm going to hold this up to the camera so you can see it. There are a few places where the gold leaf did not take. And I found those to be very interesting. It's almost like this Buddha was speaking to me. Where it obviously did not take is where the second and third chakras would be, the area that covers a large portion of the hara, which in our practice, we suggest breathing all the way into your hara. So I really felt like this Buddha, before I would finish the rest of it with some toning, that I may not cover that portion where the gold leaf didn't go. So it's in transition. There are a few other things. This is perhaps one of the most contemporary things that I have on my altar. Because I meditate here, this would be Manjushri, and he should be holding a blade. I have used this on my altar. It's just a simple piece of brushed stainless steel. It is not sharp enough to really cut anything, but there are some kind of sharp points on either end, and it has a torque in it. It's from the design collection of the Museum of Modern Art. It's a letter opener. The other thing that I will mention and show to you is what I call my talking stick. It's a piece of wood that obviously was a piece of a stick, and it has totally transformed. If you were here, you could see some of the bark and the ends where it's been broken off, but you would be surprised at how heavy this is, because it is now a piece of petrified wood. It's a stone now. And that took a couple of thousand years for this to change, to transform into what it is now, and it's been that way for a long time. All of these objects, which I like keeping on my altar, as well as the flowers and a small cloisonne dish that I keep water in that's turquoise inside. The last thing I'm going to show you is something that I do not keep on my altar, but it's something that I'm going to put on my altar in a few moments. It's a furoshiki, a piece of wrapping cloth, traditional rayon with a pattern on it. And the pattern that's on it is floral pattern of cherry blossoms. And while I put this on the altar, I'll say that everything I have mentioned here is in some form of transition. Cherry blossoms in the Japanese culture represent impermanence. And that's actually what I want to talk about this evening, is impermanence. And the koan that I will mention is case number 96 from the Blue Cliff record. This cloth was given to me by my shika when I was the shuso, about 9, almost 10 years ago. The shika is the attendant for the shuso. And traditionally, that's the person who was the last student teacher, the last shuso. This was given to me by my shika, who was Kaku Gun. And in memory of this wonderful man, I wanted to put this beautiful furoshiki, this wrapping cloth, on the altar, just to honor him and the memory of who he was in the Sangha. For a number of years, I became his roommate when we went on retreats at different times, different places. I don't use this to wrap my Dharma talk in because I wouldn't be able to read it. So I just kind of let that go. But I rarely use this, but it was such a beautiful gift. And it reminds me of who he was. The fan, which is in a traditional memorial color, white, represents for me the 10 directions of his energy. He touched many people with his writing and with his teaching. And that energy disperses in 10 different directions. Now, on to this koan, case 96, which is Chou's 3 turning words. The case. Chou expressed 3 turning words when he addressed the assembly. A gold Buddha does not pass through a furnace. A wood Buddha does not pass through a fire. A mud Buddha does not pass through water. That's the case. There is no pointer to this case. It's kind of simple and seemingly simple and direct. Turning words are about the way words can change depending on how they are presented. When I first started to study koans, about my second or third year here, I went to a koan study workshop that was led by Ryotan Roshi. And he said two things there about how to study a koan. He said many things that were very interesting. But what he quoted was a line from, I believe it is from the Fukan Zazenji, which says, stop following words and studying letters. The other thing he said at another time in terms of understanding a koan, because many of them are very kind of intriguing, like a puzzle. And what he said was, follow the energy in the story or whatever is going on in the koan. Follow the energy. And that I could really relate to. The one thing that impressed me when I first came to the Village Zendo was the energy in the room where everybody had been meditating. It was thick with what I now understand is jiriki, that quality of energy that resides in a place where people meditate consistently. So what I would suggest then for this koan is follow the energy. And now I'm just going to talk about the three verses. The first verse says, a mud Buddha does not pass through water. Spiritual light illuminates heaven and earth. Standing in the snow, he does not rest. Who wouldn't crave an irritation? Immediately, the first thing I thought of was the young man who stood at Bodhidharma's cave and asked to study with him. And he waited there for a long time, days. So at some point, he must have been standing in the snow and probably craving something to take his mind off how cold it was. I thought about doing Tangarya to become a member at the Village Zendo, and how many times I had to keep myself awake until I realized this was when the Zendo was on Varick Street and the windows faced west and the altar was in the middle of those windows. And for the rest of the day, I saw the shadow of Buddha crossing the wall in front of me. That was a really beautiful memory for me, and it kept me awake. The second verse says, a gold Buddha does not pass through a furnace. someone is making a call to see Sut Fui. There is a sign there, and the words say, where is there no pure wind? And already my mind jumps into another koan that's about being exposed in the golden wind. That's an interesting question. Where is there no pure wind? I thought about waiting to see a teacher and wondering if my questions would be answered, or even if they were good questions. What am I doing here? I mean, I know what I'm doing. I'm waiting to see a teacher, but am I going to find out about what I'm doing in my life? Is my question going to be answered? Or is this a good question? Will I find a good answer for it? The third verse says, a wood Buddha does not pass through a fire. Automatically, I think of this oven breaker. And suddenly the staff strikes. And he realizes that he has turned away from his self. There was someone who was the oven breaker to strike the stove, the oven, with a staff to make it collapse in case the fire got somehow out of control, it would be smothered. Well, I went several places with this. Was it the stick itself that didn't want to be burned up, so it struck the oven on its own? I mean, he turned away from his self, his job. Being a Tenzo at the Village Zendo, a cook, I've prepared many meals for Maitreya, the Buddhas of the future who are sitting in the other room in the Zendo meditating. And I thought about the things that, well, another Tenzo who saw an image of Manjushri in the steam over the rice pot. And what he did was he immediately picked up a spoon and struck it and said, "Don't distract me." Meaning, I have an important job here. And I thought about the number of times that I might have turned away from the stove. Once you burn something like rice, you don't just scorch it to the bottom of the pan, but if you burn it, it smokes the entire pot of rice and it's no good. You throw it out and you start over again, and not in that pot, because it will flavor all of that until it's taken out of the pot. I don't ask anyone to clean something that I've burned in a pot. I clean it myself because I turned away from what I was doing, from my job for just a moment. I mean, caramelizing carrots is one thing. They look like beautiful copper pennies, but you have to watch it and keep turning them. It's a lot of work being a Tenzo. There's a lot to take care of and consider in terms of making nurturing food for the Maitreyas that are sitting in the hall meditating. I love doing it. I love cooking for the future Buddhas. It has given a completely different meaning in my life. All of these things are about transitions, about impermanence, how things change. Thoughts change, feelings change, spirits change. Since I've been with the Village Zendo for 20 years, I never thought that I would experience so much change and be so supported in the changes that I've gone through. This is something that everybody is going through at this time. During the 2 years, almost 2 years of time during the pandemic, which surrounded the globe, we had to socially distance and wear masks and do a lot of things that were very different from what we had done in our life prior to that. And now that we're beginning to see something where we can become social again, which is our natural habitat, it's a little frightening. I have to say for myself that I was disappointed to hear some people, not here at the Village Zendo, but some people saying, I can't wait till we get back to normal. It made me want to ask them, what is normal? Nothing is normal. Everything is impermanent. Everything is changing. But, you know, this isn't the first time there's been a pandemic or a plague. And I'm not just talking about the Black Death, the plague of Black Death that was around over 2,000 years ago that wiped out the population in Europe. Nobody was left. There were massive grave sites that they've discovered, and they know what it was. Researchers have traced it back to what caused these massive deaths. And 500 years after that, there was another wave of the Black Death during medieval times. And even more recently, influenza in 1917. And even more recently, AIDS, which is a virus, and other things which have come about. Mankind has lived through these things, repopulated Europe after the Black Death and other areas around the earth. And in the meantime, our immune systems have changed, have evolved, have learned how to deal with other things that we weren't expecting, changes and transformations that we've had to make. And now we have to include the earth in that. We have to include everyone. We have to take care of each other. And we will go on. Handling this kind of transformation, this kind of impermanence, is part of who we are as human beings, as people who have minds and hearts and spirits that we can engage in positive ways to continue our life. The best support during the last 2 years that I've had has been from this Zendo and what I've learned about what I believe in and how to skillfully continue. The support of this cushion has been great. It's been consistent and has taught me how to look at what I'm doing, how to really see what reality is in this moment, now, and how to move forward, not forgetting about the past, but remembering that in my vision of the future. That's what Buddha helps me do. In the last 2 years, I wrote a series of poems that had the word beyond in them. And I'm going to recite the last of those 12 poems. And it's just called Poem Beyond number 12. My life has more meanings than I can understand or know. How can I forgive myself for thinking it's nothing? Beyond what I understand, beyond what I know, beyond even what I think, if I cannot feel the love, then I will sing my song of beyond and beyond and beyond until I can celebrate the abundance of the life that I now live. Thank you for giving me an opportunity to speak and to sit with all of you. I look forward to actually seeing you in the Zendo again. The last 2 days there have been wonderful.